Major 2, which is being hosted by Optic Texas, down in Texas, will not feature a Challengers Open bracket. So for some of the other majors, and historically, these these CDL events have been accompanied by the Challengers events, which have 60, 80, 100 teams in them, and that actually gives those Challengers players something to look forward to other than the elites and some of the cups that they play online. Um, I guess, what are your thoughts and reaction to this particular major 2, which would be, I think, like the end of March, if I'm not mistaken. Um, this one will, as far as we know at this point, will not have a challengers event.
Yeah, and to be clear too, based on what we know, seems like it's on the league almost. I mean, you can't put it entirely on the league, I guess, but based on this, this is news came from a clip on January 8th of Hex and Zuma's stream, and Hex says the CDL is not interested in giving us a subsidy to host a challengers event, so we're not hosting challengers at our event. So you can look at that in multiple ways, right? You can say like, yeah, the league isn't, you know, giving Optic financial assistance to host an event, but obviously, if Optic wanted to host a challengers section of the event out of its own dime, then they could do that. But at the same time, they don't want to do that, and you can't really blame them, right? Especially if we know historically how much these events cost to run and everything like that. So whichever way you want to look at it in terms of this not happening, it's just the cut and dry version of it is that there at this point it seems like there won't be a challengers event, and I think that this is just like I don't want to say it's the final nail in the coffin, but it's certainly another nail in a coffin that is slowly building in the challenger scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially just the way champs happened last year as that optic event, and that had its own drama with people saying like home field advantage for champs and yada yada all that stuff. But just regardless of all that, just the reception around that event and how much people seem to enjoy it and how well uh, it seemed to go and all that stuff, like it seemed like that was like a good building block for the league in terms of seeing like, wow, this is what we can have for our events. Like almost like I don't want to say like it puts it on a pedestal, but it's like, that's just sort of like what the league could look at that and be like, an optic run champs went really well. What can we do to elevate future optic events? And obviously there I actually was there challengers in some capacity at champs last year. Well, I mean there was a challengers champs, but I don't think it was there.
Um,
Um
I actually can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't remember either. But regardless, us just pretend there wasn't because I really don't remember. I feel like that's something like, okay, if Optics hosting an event that's not champs this year, this is speaking from a league perspective right now, you could sit back and be like, okay, Optic hosts this banger event for champs. What can we do to take that to the next level? Oh, we can get even more people involved if we host if we help Optic host a challengers event. And it is weird to sit here and talk about all these semantics and stuff. We don't know the numbers involved and how much it costs to run these events, how much it costs to run a pro event plus challengers event versus just running a pro event. um, we can assume it is a lot of money, and you know that's gotta be part of the reason. Like obviously, um, if it made financial sense for Optic to be able to do a challengers event on its own, even I mean based on what we know of Hex and some of his, just his standing in the community, like even if it was going to be at a slight loss to him, it feels like it would be something he would make happen if he wanted to make it happen. Um, but at the end of the day, it just at this point it sounds like that you can't blame him at the same time for wanting to get help from the league if they want to make it happen. If the league isn't willing to help make it happen, why would Hex go out of his way to try and do that when Optic doesn't have a challengers team? Probably a different story if Scump wanted to have a Challengers team like we've talked about before, and the Optic Dynasty was competing in Challengers. I'm pretty sure Hex would push a little bit more to host a Challengers event. But end of the day, we don't know all the details around what's going on with all those talks behind closed doors and all that. All we know right now is at this point that clip was from January 8th. As of January 8th, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a Challengers event at Major 2, which means there's even fewer Challengers events than there already were. And I don't even know how many there were going into this point, but we know there weren't a ton. So that, like I said, it's just another, it's another nail in the coffin. Not the final one, but it's certainly got to be discouraging for some of these Challengers players who are just putting so much time into trying to get their shot again, and just going to make it that much harder for them.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the calendar, and I want to apologize to anybody listening, I am getting sick. I'm not fully sick, so I'm. If we have a Sunday episode, I might sound like on my desk door or something, um, but yeah, challengers. So we're having 4 majors this season, and then champs in the CDL. So challengers never has more events than that. So at most, we would have had 5 events, 4 challengers opens, and then the final challenger finals, which I think are top 16 invitational. So at most, we would have had 5. Now at most, we have 4. That's not a guarantee whatsoever that we get 4 in total. Um, and you said that it's kind of another nail in the coffin. I mean, there's got to be 1,000 nails in that coffin right now. Like, this is, we even talked about it when we did our wish list or the New Year's resolutions. There's just no support for challengers, and there doesn't seem to be a plan for challengers whatsoever. I haven't seen anything from the CDL. I haven't really seen anything from the community as a whole as a legitimate plan for how challengers should operate moving forward, because it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And not talking about the talent, I think the talent has improved by and large, and we still see a lot of great challengers players come into the CDL and make an impact, but the infrastructure and the support for the challenger scene has decreased year over year, and it wasn't great to begin with. So it just seems like eventually we're going to get to the point. I don't want this to happen, but I think it's an inevitability at this point that the CDL or Activision or Microsoft just says screw it. Like, we're not going to support a path to pro scene at all. There's going to be a different it's not under our umbrella. Like, if anybody wants to kind of create their own path to pro or their own minor leagues of sort, then they can do that, but Microsoft is not going to have anything to do with that. And I think that is the way it will be eventually. I don't know how quickly that will happen, but it is you know, let's just say it, like, it's a burden for Microsoft. It's a burden for the CDL. They don't want to do anything with it. They don't do anything more than they have to. And they don't really have to do much to begin with, because who's going to hold them accountable and tell them, no, you need to have a Challengers Open for the Optic Texas event? You need to have all of these events for every major, and you need to really support it online, and in terms of viewership and making sure that eyeballs are put onto this product. They don't do any of that, which it sucks, because I forget who said it, but it's been said quite a bit across the community. The next era of CDL players are in challengers for the most part. Of course, there are players that are 18 and they turn 18 and then they're automatically in the CDL, so they don't technically get to play in any of those challengers events. But if you look across the CDL, a lot, I would guess the majority of them have been in challengers at one point in time, or the equivalent, I guess, if you're older than you started before 2020, but like, you were in that minor league and moved your way up to the major leagues. And I think it sucks, especially considering there was no real challenger scene for a while. It was just all connected to the pro scene. Like, you would have these major the MLG events where there's, I don't know how many teams there were, like 120 at some point, and these massive open brackets, and you got to, if you were no name and you didn't have any money, you never made anything in Call of Duty, you could go and you could beat a bunch of teams, and then you could be considered pro, and you could be a part of the elite group in COD esports. And then that's just not a thing that happens anymore. Like, you really can only get scouted and discovered if you're scrimming pro teams now. Like, I don't think that there's any other way, for the most part, that people can get discovered in a meaningful way. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but it doesn't seem like we have a real good system. And I think if you look at any professional sports league, they are all very serious about their minor league system, or whatever the equivalent it is. Like, the NFL has college football, like something they don't have to deal with. Like, it's a completely separate thing, but they sure use the hell out of it. The NBA has college basketball, but even they were like, we need something else, like a buffer in between. So they have the G League. Obviously, you're a huge baseball fan. MLB has the most extensive minor league system of any American sports league. And it works for them. It certainly works, and it's not profitable all the time. We've seen that with minor league baseball and the restructuring that's happened over the last few years. But it's necessary to have. It's a necessary evil. It's a necessary burden, and it's a necessary cost for a legitimate esports league like the CDL. They have to have those minor leagues.
Yeah, and while you were just talking there, I was trying to look to just for more transparency. I mean, most longtime listeners of the Eagle Chall podcast know we definitely don't focus on challengers. There were definitely previous years where I myself, I won't speak for Preston, but I get a pretty good sense that, in previous years, Preston and I both knew a little bit more about challengers than, some people or your average CDL fan. But I would say in recent years, that's definitely not true for either of us. As the years have gone on, we haven't kept up with challengers as much as in previous years. And I'm trying to look right now. I can't even find a schedule, and I don't even know if there's a challengers event at Major One in Madrid. So like this might not even be exclusive to just this Major Two thing. That this what if the CDL is saying like they're not going to be helping these franchises host a challengers event in any of the majors this year? Then is there no challengers lands? Like I'm trying to find this information. I can't seem to find like anything on the actual schedule outside of the elites. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But while you were also talking there about you kind of, it's not necessarily directly on topic with what we were talking about, but you kind of mentioned like the former system and people getting their chance through like open bracket and all that stuff. And that reminded me of something Hastro tweeted on January 11th. Obviously, Hastro hasn't been involved as much from the esports perspective in recent years as he was previously, but he's the former uh, owner slash CEO of Team Envious. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that was his title. Well, on Jan 11th, he tweeted, without the MLG Pro Circuit, competitive Halo and Call of Duty are fragments of what they once were. What's the solution? It's definitely not league reserved for a few teams, but probably the open ecosystem that once flourished and gave every team, pro or am, a chance to shine. And I really think that's just, we've talked about the quote unquote good old days or the glory days, however you want to phrase it, of those MLG events where you have your 16 team pool play, 4 pools of 4, and then one team gets seeded in from the open bracket where it's just a pit of 100 plus teams competing for 4 spots for just the chance to play against these pro teams. And in some cases, the team would go into a pool and it would be the pool of death and they would go 0-4 and just get smoked. But they at least had a chance to, play against some of the pros and get better. Well, then there are those few chances where some of these teams get brought up into pool play and they're able to beat some of these other pro teams and cause some drama and make some stuff happen. So um I don't know what the answer is. We talked about that on our wish list episode, like a possible expansion helping us get back to like a 16 team league that would have 4 pools of 4 or something similar to those MLG events, and then maybe if expansion helps lead into a system where we get more of those pro-ams, which is something else we talked about, yada yada. So it's kind of talking in circles here, but that just your spiel reminded me of that Hastro tweet, so I wanted to read that off.
And I don't know what the perfect system is. I don't think anyone
Yeah,
has the perfect system,
no,
but I think esports, more so than traditional sports in America, should look to like European soccer as kind of a model they can base some of the operations on. I know you're not a huge soccer fan, and neither am I. But like, look at English soccer, for example. They have the Premier League, which, if I'm not mistaken, is like the top 20 teams in England, and I think the bottom two teams, I could be wrong. So if you're English or a big Premier League fan, please don't come at my neck too hard. But as far as I know, it's 20 teams. They're considered the top flight, the top league in England, and one of the most popular leagues in the world. But they have 20 teams, and then I think the bottom two teams from the season get relegated to the second league, and then the top two teams from the second league will get promoted for the next season. And I think that is a good system for the CDL to kind of base their motto on. I don't know what the number is. If they want to keep it at 12, that's fine. I think that's a little restrictive because the talent has gotten greater. I think 16 is probably the sweet spot because that's traditionally what Call of Duty has done. 16 teams is kind of, and it fits into a bracket perfectly. You can split it into 4 groups of 4. So it's just a nice round number for everybody to attach themselves to. But I think promotion and relegation has to be coming back, and especially if you're not going to have these expansion fees, which you can't really do. Promotion and relegation to the same level if you're having expansion fees, especially the ones that were so restrictive of like 25, 30, 35 million dollars, that obviously didn't end up happening. But that can't really be a thing in the promotion and relegation, but it would certainly liven up at least the top part of challengers and get some of these organizations that aren't currently involved and don't see a reason to get involved in challengers. What point is it for, let's just for example say Team Liquid, why would they ever get involved in challengers? What is the point? What's the payoff for a team like that to say, I'm going to give these guys a chance to represent our organization? What is the end goal? That they win challengers events? Like, nobody really pays attention to those events. And you're never going to make your money back. And not saying that CDL teams necessarily make their money back, but at least if you're in the CDL, there are sponsors, there are whatever live streaming rights that they get. There's something, there's the attention, there's at least the prestige of being in that top level. Challenges has none of that, and there's no reason for these organizations to get involved, and they don't get involved. So there has to be some kind of connection between challengers and the CDL, or just completely blow it all up and just go back to the system that we were already with previously before the CDL, which the CWL wasn't the best format either. So there's always room for improvement, but it certainly needs to be improved at some point, and hopefully some point in the future, near future.